That would be great. Thanks very much for coming last time. And this is an effort today, paying them.
Send that off.
Yeah, they don't get a musical accompaniment.
Thanks.
Thanks, man. A lot of you were brought up to speak last time with our last communications meeting last month. Thanks very much for coming to that. Thanks also for coming to the service at Zion on November 12th. We ended up having a meeting between the mutual leadership teams that went until 3:30 in the afternoon. And we're having a real coming together of the minds. And the purpose of the event today is to have another low-key communications event in which we bring you up to speed on things that have happened since then. We don't have any PowerPoint charts for you today, but Pastor Ellie's going to spend about 10 minutes talking to you about the latest, and we'll certainly leave an opportunity for your questions and answers. So, without further ado.
Thank you.
Pastor Ellie.
Yeah, so the bulk of our time today will be a question and answer session. The last time we met, we focused pretty much exclusively on the needs of this building. We talked quite a bit about the roof and the foundation and the walls and everything in between, and we showed lots of pictures and received lots and lots and lots of really helpful information from Tim. And so today we're going to kind of zoom out a little bit and address some of the questions that are around the possibility of us merging with Zion and the buying and selling of property and all that jazz. So I'm just going to give a quick update for where we are in these talks with Zion at this point. And then, again, the bulk of our time together will be a question and answer session. So all questions will be welcome. We are Zooming this. Camera's right there. We are also recording it, so folks who aren't able to be here now, either in person or on Zoom, can watch it later. And Zoom, for those who aren't familiar with the platform, Zoom is interactive. Like, people can type questions in and send them to us if they're watching from home. So I've asked Jeff to just keep an eye on the chat feed. And so if questions come from folks who are Zooming in, Jeff will relay those to us as well. So like Ellen said, last month when we had our worship service with Zion, we had a wonderful fellowship time afterwards, and then our leadership team and their church council, which is like the equivalent body, stayed, as well as myself and Pastor Charlie, and we talked through some of the details of a proposed merger. The broad brushstrokes are that we have to abide by our own denominational law and their own denominational law and New York State law in making sure this merger goes through. So he and I, Pastor Charlie and I, are each consulting all of the appropriate people to help make sure we've got our I's dotted and T's crossed. What we're looking at doing is buying their building from them. That would be the first step. The purchase price that's being bounced around now, and hear me when I say nothing's been signed yet, but the purchase price that's being bounced around now is $500,000. That's considerably less than what their property was appraised at by a professional commercial appraiser. It is the lowest amount that their bishop will sign off on. In order for them to sell their building, their bishop has to authorize the sale, and that is the lowest price that he will authorize. After that, part of the agreement that we're ironing out would be that they have some of their own fiscal obligations to meet. They would use about $150,000 of that $500,000 for that, which would leave about $350,000 remaining. That money would all be poured back into the ministry that would take place there at 18 Snell Road. Which would help significantly with subsidizing our costs as far as the child care center goes. Many of you know that one of the things that we're endeavoring to do, that we're called to do, is to build a Christian child care center, and that's part of why we're looking specifically at this site. They already have Cozy Days daycare there. Their building is well situated to accommodate a child care center in a lot of ways, But there are also some renovations that would need to happen. New York State requires, for instance, that there be one bathroom for every 15 children who are of toileting age. You don't need a bathroom for a 10-week-old, but you do need for a 3-year-old. So one bathroom for every 15 children. They have 3 bathrooms, 4 toilets in their entire building right now. So we'll have to add more bathrooms, things to that effect. So there's a process that's going to be underway if and when we do end up purchasing their building. The process by which we purchase their building, though, requires 4 levels of approval, same as for selling this building. Anytime we buy a building or sell a building for the church, we need 4 levels of approval. They are the pastor, the district superintendent, a district committee with a really long and boring name, the district committee on church building and locations. And the 4th layer of approval is you all. We will need to take a congregation-wide vote, and we need to have a simple majority, which means any amount more than half passes. We need a congregation-wide vote to approve the sale of this building and a congregation-wide vote to approve the purchase of their building. Those votes are set to happen mid-January. Zion will be voting that same day on whatever proposal we come to, and we're very close to locking in a proposal to present to the 2 congregations for a vote. Zion will be voting that same day. I think that's it for my information dump at this point. Did I miss any really crucial pieces before I open for Q&A?
No, this is just, now we're at one of the hardest parts, which is to get down to the real nitty-gritty. Instead of talking about sort of an umbrella plan and getting agreement, now there's considerable back and forth about the money and on our end where it comes from initially, on their end getting it from us, how they spend theirs, combining the 2. So I would say, please, as the leader of your leadership team, trust your leadership team to do the right thing on behalf of the church. We are not going to do anything stupid, and we are we are acting with great deliberation to make sure that we are doing what we think God is directing us to do, but also we are trying to act in the best interests of this congregation, that congregation, and we are communicating like crazy with all entities. Pastor Emily is doing a fantastic job of helping us stay on the straight and narrow as far as what the conference requires, what the rules on the Methodist side are, so that when we have an agreement, we can confidently go forward with a vote. And right now we're looking at January 14th for that, knowing that we have dotted all our I's and crossed our T's. She has done a mammoth amount of work in drafting merger proposals, counter-drafting them, but also making sure that from the Methodist side, we are compliant in every way. So kudos to her. So that's all I'll say. And we welcome your questions and hope that we can answer them.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we started, Jeff shared a question that some of you have asked him, which is our AV equipment going with us? And the short answer is yes. They have no AV system. We have a beautiful state-of-the-art, fresh new AV system. It would make no sense to leave it here. There might be some nuts and bolts that need to be different just because the space is a different size and shape, but the vast bulk of the AV equipment will be going with us, and Jeff is going to be consulting on all of that.
The sound system too?
Yes. Yep. Yes, I think. Yes, Jeff is nodding yes. My communication with Jeff has been, if and when we get to the point of a move, He is to tell me what he needs, and I am to figure out how to make it happen. So I'm trusting the expert on this. Yeah, Deb.
How will the renovations be covered financially?
How will the renovations be covered financially was the question. Still ironing out details. A couple of possibilities exist for that. One possibility is that $350,000 that Zion would be paying into the child care center. That could cover, at least in part, renovations. The other main option off the top of my head is the parsonage fund. When the parsonage on
Lafayette.
what street did we, yeah, Lafayette. I used to live directly across the street from Deb when I was in the parsonage, and I'm taking a brain blank. When the parsonage on Lafayette was sold, that money was put into a pot. We've been drawing some interest from it, which has been helping to sustain our operating budget. But by denominational rules, we can only use that money for something building related. So we could use it to buy another parsonage at some point in the future. We could use it to buy other church property, or we could use it for renovations to church-owned property. The parsonage monies can only be used for property-related expenses. So that's another option. Until the proposal with Zion is officially ironed out and voted upon, I won't be able to answer those questions for sure, but that's what we're looking at right now. Yes, David, right?
Yes, I'm new to the parish, but has it been inspected by a building inspector to make sure that the structure is sound? There isn't a lot of maintenance that's going to be ensured, like this one building here. It seems like you need a new roof. The chimney's coming down because it's breaking up, it's not stable, and it's large. A lot of homes now are being sold with no inspections.
Yeah.
Have you done your due diligence in doing a thorough inspection of the property before offering to put a purchase price in?
We're not that far in the process yet. We haven't had a formal inspection done. We have had our building maintenance chairperson, who's Tim, walk through it with an eagle eye, so to speak, and he's by and large comfortable with what he sees there. Is that fair to say?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I mean, there's some, two major issues that might concern. It's gonna need roof work. Not to the extent that this building does, more the expense.
Speak a little louder, please.
And it can be moved in stages. There are some structural issues that I'm concerned with. I don't know, I would want an engineer to look at it, because something is settled, something is moved. I don't know if that was on at construction and it's done. I don't know, that's not my expertise. I just noticed there's an issue, so.
So we will bring in
Yeah.
experts to
Yeah,
take a look at it
other than
before we
that,
sign
you know,
over.
it would probably be the normal maintenance stuff.
That would need to be soon though, if you're talking about voting and making, determinations. I would think that inspection would need to be soon.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to trade headaches, right?
Alright.
I mean,
Yeah.
one of the reasons I'm getting from people that I've talked to is that there's major work that needs to be done
Right.
with this home. This home of God,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
And you don't want to take one headache and buy another piece of property and exchange the headache.
Yeah. So I know some folks in the back are having a hard time hearing, and on Zoom. And so I'll just reiterate some of the conversation that's happened just now. The concern that David brought up is that we haven't yet gotten a formal building inspection done, and that we really ought not to be buying the building without doing a formal building inspection, because, as he put it, we don't want to be trading one headache for another. Tim chimed in and said that he does have some specific points of concern that he would want for an engineer or an expert to look at before we sign on the dotted line. And so we would make that part of our process, is having an inspector or an engineer, someone to that effect, look through the building, look the building over, and make sure that we're clear-headed about what we're buying. I will say, just comparing one building to another, I mean, this building is well over 100 years old, that building is like 50 years old, this building is 3.5 stories tall, that building is 1 story. You know, there are a lot of ways in which replacing a roof here versus replacing a roof there, if we're gonna make an apples to apples comparison like that, any work that a building requires is going to cost astronomically more here than it will there.
It's, the oldest part of that building is from 1976, and the addition was put on in 1999. So it may be the case that we just need to put a roof on the older part. We'll at some point need to upgrade the parking lot too. Another thing, Dave, is that we need to, in order for it to be a daycare center, we need to have, New York State requires that a fire inspector come down and take a look at the whole facility for its suitability too. So and that's still to be done too. Frankly, we've been, yes, you're right, all of these things need to be attended to. Right now, we are focused on a merger document in which we are taking a look at taking a look at the money and how much this costs. And we're doing a deep dive in our own budget to see what the upfront costs are and figuring out where the money comes from. But we are not ignoring what you suggest.
And so if we're not able to get all of those inspections completed before the January 14th vote, then we can write into the resolution that you would all be voting on something to the effect of approval of purchase pending inspection results, something to that effect.
Contingency clause.
What's that?
A contingency
A
clause.
contingency clause, yes, exactly, yep. And then if it were to play that way, that we took the vote on January 14th and then had a formal inspection done and found that there were astronomical problems that we didn't realize were there, then we could reserve the right to say, sorry, no deal.
So I have a follow-up question.
Sure.
Have you done an internal survey of your membership? Because if you move from this building to another structure, what's the percentage of your parish is not gonna go?
Yeah.
Because there's a potential for you to lose some of your congregation, because they're not gonna wanna go to a new structure. They'll go off and find something that maybe suits them better.
Right.
And, you know, the loyalty clause, you know, I mean, so have you done an internal thing? Because if you lose a lot of your parish, or some of your parish, and also as the parish that you're looking to absorb, have they done an internal to see if they're gonna leave the church because they don't like the new structure coming in?
Right.
With the pastor and everything else? Are they gonna feel like they're secondhand citizens now because they don't have control of their own destiny?
Right.
The building is gonna be owned by your parish. Has that been done?
So I'm gonna repeat the questions just again because folks back there in the camera and whatnot. What he's asking is, have we done an internal audit of our membership? And has Zion done an internal audit of their membership? Some of the points of concern would be, are we going to lose a lot of folks, or is Zion going to lose a lot of folks if this deal goes through? If we move, are folks going to leave our congregation because they don't want to do church anywhere but this building? Or is Zion going to lose a lot of folks because they'll feel disempowered or like their building is being handed off to someone else? Has an internal audit been done? We haven't done a formal on paper one, but we have been having intentional conversations with a lot of people within the congregation. From what I understand, regardless of which choice we make, it will cost us some members. So there are some folks who have said to me, Pastor, if we stay in this building, I don't know how much longer I can hang around. That's not faithful stewardship, that's not a good use of our funds, that's not what God would have us do. And I have almost the same exact number of folks saying, Pastor, if we leave this building, I'm not coming to church anymore. I can't do church anywhere but this building. The reality of the situation that we're in is that we have no choice but to make a dramatic decision in one way or another. It would be a dramatic decision to stay put with things as they are. It would also be a dramatic decision to move. And when dramatic decisions are made in an organization, some people leave. My sense overall is that the majority of the congregation, a strong majority of the congregation, supports this merger and would come with us. We have also held 2 joint worship services at Zion, so folks here could just kind of get the flavor of the space and the people and what life might be like. In my less holy moments, I compare it to sleepovers before the wedding night, right? So we've had a couple of sleepovers there. We're not married to them yet, but we've had a couple of sleepovers there just to test the waters and see if we like it, right?
Are you going with the new church?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, their pastor came out of retirement to pastor their congregation. He would like to go back into retirement. I've got a few years before retirement, so yes.
They also, for a long time, have only been in that church for worship 2 Sundays a month. They go to the Potter Lutheran Church, where the pastor goes the other 2 Sundays if they go. If the people in Potter want to go to a Lutheran church, they come to Geneva.
So it's reinvigorated there.
Yes.
They were thrilled, for example, last month to have a choir. We would bring a lot to them. They are, for as small a congregation as we now have, theirs is much smaller. So I think that I am not, the words that their pastor used as recently as last month is that they're all in with this idea. They are very enthusiastic about this.
And the
because
childcare's a new family too, right?
we certainly hope so.
Yeah.
The child care center, with its opportunity to introduce not only the kids, but their parents to Jesus Christ, affords an opportunity to have a whole new church plant. This is a dream. And just reflecting back on something else Dave said, this leadership team has been working for a number of years, and we've done questionnaires in the community, questionnaires among our people, what are our values, what, confirming our mission, and the leadership team is following a mandate that we feel from our congregation to do something, to fulfill our mission to bring new disciples to Jesus Christ. And we have weighed so many options about what that ministry looks like, what's possible, and we think that this opportunity to combine with Zion and make a daycare center there gives us the best opportunity to do that. So we're working like heck to fulfill it. We're not gonna do anything stupid. Let me repeat, we are not gonna do anything stupid, but a lot of work has been put into seeing if this is a really viable option, and we think it is.
I have a question.
Yeah, Bonnie.
May have been said, asked, may have been, somebody question, gave the answer. If somebody from the outside donated all the money you needed to fix everything in the church, and that means everything from the top to the bottom, how much money would it be?
Well, let me repeat your question first so folks can hear it, and then I'll answer it. Bonnie's question, if somebody from the outside were to donate all of the money, every last dollar we need to fix this building from the top to the bottom, how much money would that be? And the short answer is we don't know, because with construction projects, as soon as you start to address one problem, you find another one that was hiding underneath it, right? What we know of right now is that the roof is in need of hundreds of thousands of dollars of work, and that the foundation is compromised, and that this wall is crumbling, and walls in other areas too. We know that there's water damage internally because of a lot of those external issues, And so we don't know the full extent of that water damage until we start pulling out ceiling tiles and whatever else.
Would it be over $1 million, you think?
Well,
Tim says well over $1 million.
And that's just to get the building back to what it is. Nothing about our new signature ministry,
Right,
Christian daycare.
right, and that, Faye says that's just to get the building back to where, to a functional building, right? That's nothing to say about a signature ministry. So our call as Christians, Christ followers, United Methodists, is to make disciples of Jesus Christ. Fixing the building does not make disciples. There's something more that we ought to be doing, that we need to be doing in order to make disciples. What we have perceived as a good way to make disciples is by establishing a Christian childcare center that's situated to function as a whole faith community with kids and their parents and their siblings and everyone. This building cannot accommodate that without unthinkably massive amounts of renovation. It's things like plumbing for that whole one toilet for every 15 kids thing, but it's also things like, if you picture the second floor Sunday school classrooms, they don't have fire escapes. There's not proper means of egress. It wouldn't pass a fire inspection. We would have to put those wrought iron fire ladders outside of them, and even that would only suffice for the older kids, because you're not gonna get a 2-year-old toddler up and down a fire ladder, right? There's gotta be other means of egress. And so, that's just one of many, many examples. So part of the question is, what do we do about the crumbling building? The bigger question is, how do we make disciples? Fixing the building doesn't do that, so.
It's interesting, Bonnie, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating an example that I used at the last meeting. We got excited several months ago when Family Promise said, was looking for a new headquarters. It wanted to put its offices in some of its apartments in a location in Ontario County, and they wanted to come see our building and did a great, several of their leadership team did a great big tour all the way through, and really expressed some enthusiasm, and we thought, wow, that would be great if something like that happened and the building could be used for that. Got a call by noon the next day, and their board had met and said, we can't be in a building that has plumbing that's 100 years old. Your building is too unreliable for that infrastructure. So we should have expected our response, but.
I saw Pat's hand up. Oh, Trish.
What are the, okay, Trish, go ahead.
No, go ahead. She's.
What are the startup costs for the signature daycare? Because you have to have money to pay the people that you're hiring.
Yes, that's right. The question was, what are the startup costs for the signature daycare? Because we have to have money to pay the people that we're hiring. Until we decide on what program we're going to implement, or whether we're going to build our own program, I can't give you an exact dollar amount. Some of the programs that we're looking at are in like the $75,000 to $100,000 range for the program materials and like the payroll system and those sorts of bits and pieces, curriculum, all of that jazz. There are less expensive programs available. We can also look at DIYing. Other costs to consider are, again, the building renovations, supplies, materials, that kind of thing. And we would need to hire some of the staff before launch, because we need like a director before launch, for instance. And then that director will be hiring other staff and so on. I don't have an exact dollar amount in mind. What I can say is that the $350,000 that Zion would be paying back into the ministry, that's what that's for, those startup costs. So the plan would be that we would pay a $500,000 purchase price to Zion, and then Zion, over some determined plan, would pay back into the child care center $350,000 of that $500,000. And so that's how a lot of those expenses would be covered. The renovation, the startup costs, the staffing, that kind of thing. One of the models we're looking at has the child care center being self-sustaining fiscally and profitable within about 3 years. So it would be a cost to begin with to play the long game and see a return on that 3-ish years out, and then see continuous returns after that. And again, part of the way I'm framing this, in my mind, the worst thing that could happen, because I like to ask myself that question, if we do this merger and this startup and everything, the worst thing that could happen is that the startup flops. It's not going to, we're not gonna let that happen, but just playing devil's advocate with myself. But if we make 6, 8, 10, 12 new disciples of Jesus Christ in the process, then that's more than what we're doing now, right? Our mission is disciple making, and so if we make new disciples, mission accomplished. Don't get me wrong, we're not gonna let it flop. There's too much invested, there's too much blood, sweat, and tears, there's too many sleepless nights, we're not gonna let it flop. But just to play devil's advocate, even the worst case scenario, new people have come into the family of Christ, and that's not a bad outcome.
I think I've mentioned this before, maybe not to you, but to some individual. What would be the harm of having a GoFundMe page?
There's no harm in a GoFundMe page. I don't think
Not
it's.
the church in Geneva.
Yeah, I think we could do a GoFundMe page. Sure, there's no harm in it. We can't rely on it to be our bread and butter income-wise, but it sure could help.
Might surprise you.
Yeah,
Might surprise
absolutely.
all of us. Like I said, there might be somebody that years ago came to this church, quite wealthy, and maybe they loved the ministers, they loved the people, they felt very welcome, and they didn't want to leave, but they had to for some reason. Maybe they got lots of money, want to know where to leave the money.
Yeah.
What to do with the money.
Yeah, absolutely. We could certainly set up a GoFundMe page. I don't see a reason not to.
No, I just had a comment. I was listening to Bonnie's question about the building and how much money we would need. And I know that many people have had a lot of hope in those kinds of questions, wondering. Because over the years, we've had campaigns for a lot of different types of things, and we have poured a heck of a lot of money into this building. I feel comfortable saying that we have been good stewards of this building to the best of our ability. But I think what the leadership team has found through all the hours of work, all the meetings, all the conversations, and all the prayer is that we're now called upon to be stewards of the vision and the mission that God has given to us. And I think those things at this time in our lives take precedence over the stewardship of just a building. Now we're talking about God's mission and vision for us. Amen.
And one more thing, I have to go, but I had a conversation with Gary Schultz years ago. Don't quote me the exact time, but I was saying the last 30+ years, we have done close to $1 million in this building. Yet here we are with a building that's falling down around. It's not sustainable. We've never built it.
Yeah.
Tricia said it much better.
Yeah, I know.
It takes all of us.
We couldn't hear that back here.
I can reiterate it, yeah. The little half wall makes it hard, I know. So what Tim was saying was that he was having a conversation with someone recently who's familiar with the church and the financials and whatnot, and put it together that over the last 30 years, God bless you, over the last 30 years, through capital campaigns and fundraisers and whatnot, we've put about $1 million into this building over the last 30 years. And now here we are needing another $1 million. Yeah. And so I think the point there being the stewardship question is changing flavor from what it may have been 10, 15, 30 years ago. Yeah.
So who would start the GoFundMe page?
I don't know, I could put it up in 5 minutes.
That's good.
Bonnie,
I'm counting on you.
what's it funded?
Right.
Our church.
No, is it funding the new enterprise or this building? What's it funding, the
The
GoFundMe?
building, so we don't have to leave that.
Oh.
Well,
We don't have to sell it.
so what I would do, Bonnie, what I would do is I would wait until after our January 14th vote. And then I would set up a GoFundMe page to fund the will of the congregation as per the vote. So, if you all vote to stay in this building, then I could set up a GoFundMe page for the building. If you all vote to move to Zion, then I could set up a GoFundMe page for the ministry startup there. Pat?
You were talking about the parsonage fund,
Yes.
but is that not used to supply housing costs for you?
It's not. Discipline says that, that it can't be. The housing costs for me come out of the general operating budget, so tithes and offerings. But the general operating budget is subsidized in part by income from the parsonage fund, which is doing very well, all things considered, because Gary's amazing with investments and such. So to be clear, if we were to use the monies in the parsonage fund to fund a renovation at Zion, then we would no longer have that income to our general operating budget that we're taking as earnings off of that fund. Yes.
This gentleman here.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't wanna do scripture because I'm not well versed, but we're losing the focus on the building as the church. The church is the people that believe in Christ.
Right.
Jesus said, when he was roaming the hillsides, he said, the church is a gathering of more than one person spreading the word of God. So we're putting more focus on the structure which Jesus resented, because it was a power thing when he went into the temple. And he went into a rage because he saw that it was being treated as a marketplace.
Yep.
That's not what Jesus' message was. Jesus' message was, the people is the church.
Well, the founder of Methodism, Charles Wesley, just used to go out and preach to the people in the countryside.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
His horse.
we were taught in religious classes, right?
Yeah.
With the hand,
Yeah.
right? No,
Yeah.
there's a simplicity to this, but it's the truth, is that the church is the hand. And it's the hand of God.
Yeah.
Amen.
And it's not the structure that we come to love and cherish. We should be emphasizing more on the word of the Lord and the people that spread that message.
Making
Absolutely.
disciples of Christ.
Yeah, and that's what the leadership team is hoping to accomplish through this move, that if we move out of a more needy building into a less needy building, then we can put less of our focus on the building and more of it into sharing the word of God. Absolutely. Pat?
I think I've asked before, but I'm still asking.
Sure.
If and when we do this, will our service accommodate the Lutheran background as well as our own?
Yes, so Pat's question, if and when we do this, will our service accommodate the Lutheran background as well as our own? And the answer is yes. Pastor Charlie has already given me Lutheran hymnals, Lutheran liturgical books, Lutheran this, that, and the other thing. And I learned from talking with him that there's a convoluted sort of denominational rules reason for this, but he has to stay on the books as the Lutheran pastor, even if not being paid as such or pastoring actively. He has to stay in name as such. And so he's going to make himself available to me so that I can check my liturgy with him, and he and I can have that back and forth and make sure that their traditions are honored. I'll tell you kind of a funny story about that. I grew up in the United Methodist Church from when I was 5 was when we started going to the church. my very first appointment, fresh out of seminary. I was like 24, I think, and had no business being put in charge of a church at that point. But there I was. That year, leading up to Christmas, starting maybe September, I said to the congregation every single Sunday, I'm new here, I don't know your traditions. If there's something at Advent or Christmas time that's important to you, please tell me so that I can honor that, because I'm not telepathic, I won't know what you don't tell me. And I said this from the pulpit every single Sunday morning for months. We get to the other side of Christmas to mid-January and someone comes knocking on my office door, Pastor, I'm leaving the church. I said, I'm so sorry to hear that. Would you like to tell me why? Well, we have this sacred Christmas tradition that you totally ignored this year. And I said, no, wait a minute, nobody told me. I asked you. So I am aware of the need to honor the sacred traditions of any church that I'm coming into, and will be very active in soliciting input from the Lutheran congregation and their pastor. Yes.
Just a side note, Tasha was brought up in the Methodist church. They stood for the gospel reading.
Cool. Yeah, I've seen some Methodist churches do that. Yeah. Other questions?
What'd she say, Dan?
She said Tasha was brought up in the Methodist church, and in her childhood church, they stood during the gospel readings. Yeah.
Because that's one of the differences.
You feeling like getting some exercise? We can stand more in worship.
I agree. That's part of their tradition
It is,
that I
yeah.
think we could so easily accommodate.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Other questions? Cal?
Before it gets lost or whatever, having been a former leadership team member, thank you, I appreciate the time, the energy,
Yes.
the laying in bed at night, I'm sure thinking of how we can do it, how we could do that, now maybe we should do it. So I, and I'm sure many others, thank you so much for the time, the effort, the energy, the time away from family that you're putting into this for us.
Thank you, Dan.
I appreciate it.
Some of us couldn't hear Cal's comments.
You couldn't hear Cal's comments. He was expressing a word of thanks, especially as a former leadership team member. He is aware of how much work the leadership team has put into this, how many sleepless nights, time away from family, all of that. And so he's expressing a word of gratitude for all the work of the leadership team. Yeah.
Just a little clarification, I'm not fully aware. We are not fully aware because we haven't been part of it. There's a lot of stuff that's hidden that we just will never know.
And also, I want to thank everyone who baked and cooked and put on this beautiful spread and the decoration. I think you should give me a big
Yeah,
round.
thank you,
Thank you very much.
Who's on me?
Yeah, Jeff.
So I have two questions. First one is, assuming that it's approved that we're going to, move to the other church, what would be the timeline in your mind of how soon we would be migrated over there and running? And then also, if and when this church sells, what happens to those funds?
Got it. Okay, so I'm assuming these are Zoom questions.
No, I just was curious.
Oh, these are Zoom questions.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Good.
So Jeff's two questions, one of which is assuming we do authorize the deal, the merger, the buying, the selling, what's the moving timeline look like? And then the second question was, remind me, I'm so sorry.
How much, whatever we get for this
Whatever we
building?
do with the money
Yeah.
from the sale of this building, yes. Let me answer Jeff's questions first, Ernie, and then I'll hear your question. Is that okay? Cool. All right, so to Jeff's first question, I know what would happen in my dreamiest dream world. Whether that's realistic or not is yet to be seen. But in my dreamiest dream world, if we have a positive vote on January 14th, and so do the folks at Zion, then we get paperwork signed and deals brokered as quickly as possible and start moving like February. It'll be a process. It'll be a very big process to move. My dream would be to have a big, bright, celebratory service on Easter Sunday, which is very early this year. It's in March. To have a big, bright, celebratory service on Easter Sunday to celebrate the birth of the new joint ministry. Part of where that timeline is coming from and why I'm naming such an aggressive hoped for timeline is because I'm looking all the way to September. Is the date that we're there. I'm just saying, in my dream world, this is what the timeline looks like. To your second question, what happens with the monies from the sale of this building? I'll be honest that I haven't reread that part of the United Methodist Book of Discipline recently, but I would think that like the monies from the sale of a parsonage, that money from buildings has to be kept as money for buildings. I don't know that for sure, though. I can't say that for sure. If that's the case, then Gary will do his Gary magic and invest it marvelously, and we'll have some interest from that for the operating budget. But the bulk of it, I would think, would have to be reserved for building-related expenses, which in the new child care center can be renovations and eventually, in like the 10-year plan, expansion. That building sits on like 7 acres. There's room for growth.
Yes, John.
Yeah, and then Nancy.
And another
and Bernie.
question. It's my understanding that the town owns the clock?
No.
No. Somebody told us the
Our
town
clock?
owns the clock.
No.
They disavowed it.
They disowned
We
it.
went through that when we wanted to have some money to put, and we went to the city, and the city said, no, we're not giving you any money, and they found where there was loose stuff, correct me if anybody else remembers this, but it wasn't specific that they owned it or they
Gotcha.
had any responsibility, and they
So they don't own it?
No.
wanted to know about it.
Not at all.
Never did.
Ernie had a question right after Jeff. Ernie, do you still want to jump in?
Yeah, how much is this church worth?
We had it commercially appraised. The appraiser named an amount of $285,000. Team, is that right? Do I remember that right? $285,000.
Oh, okay.
I have another question.
Nancy, and then back to Bonnie. Yeah.
And I was just gonna say, you said it's $500,000 to purchase the other church.
Right.
In your wildest dreams, if you sold this church first, couldn't that be used toward that $500,000 to purchase a new building?
So Nancy's question is, it's $500,000 to purchase Zion. In my wildest dreams, if we sold this building first, could we use that money to purchase Zion? My answer would be I have never thought of that as a possibility because it would make me very anxious to sell our current church building without knowing beyond a shadow of a doubt that we've got someplace to land. If we haven't bought the Zion building yet.
Where would that money, that $500,000 come from initially?
Good question. So, Faye, can I bounce this to you? You've got your head better wrapped around this than I do. No, she says no.
It's
Okay.
your pockets.
I'll try. So Nancy's question, where then would that $500,000 come from initially? Our financial officers have been meeting regularly, avidly considering this question. Some of the possibilities include, and nothing's been decided for sure yet, but some of the possibilities include taking out a mortgage and or a loan, and or using money from the Living Memorial Fund. We're not particularly comfortable with any of those options. They're all better than $1 million to fix this building, right? I'm not saying that I'm super excited about the idea of a $500,000 mortgage. I'm not excited about that idea at all. And it's the better of two not great options.
But of course, if you did sell this building, then later on, that money could be used to
Right.
pay part of the mortgage.
Absolutely, absolutely. So if we were to take out a $500,000 mortgage, buy Zion's building with that, sell this building, get, let's say, $250 for it, then we could just pay that $250 right into that $500 and cut our mortgage in half, right? That would be a possibility. We haven't pinned down a specific course yet. We're still ironing out the details, but the financial officers and leadership team are working so hard to figure out the course that would be least fiscally harmful. Yes or no, did I answer correctly?
That was super.
Okay, great.
Another question.
Yes, dear.
My first question is, what would happen to the chimes in our church where we hear all the beautiful music about every day? Would that be stopped?
So Bonnie's question is, what would happen with the carillon that rings out the beautiful music every day? Would that be stopped? And until this building sells, it's ours to do with as we see fit, and after the building sells, that decision would be up to the new owners.
And couldn't this building be considered an historic building, historic church? Are we an historic church?
So Bonnie's next question, are we considered a historic church or a historic building? To the best of my knowledge, this building is not officially on the historic registry. It is, of course, historic in nature, but a lot of churches choose not to put their buildings on the historic registry because once you put your building on the historic registry, you are restricted in terms of what you can do to the building. The idea would be maintaining the historicness of the building. And so things like the work we just had done on our Yankee gutters to fix a lot of the issues out here, those are the sorts of things that could be challenged if we were on a historic registry. So no, we're not officially designated as such. Ernie?
Who would buy our church?
Who would buy our church?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
You have no
Pray
idea.
about that for us.
Well, that's what I've been wondering. With
Got a
churches
buyer
struggling,
already?
I'm thinking who would buy it?
Yeah, so a more honest answer to that question is, still, I don't know, but also there are charities that could consider buying this building. There are developers that could consider buying this building, like with the Cam's church, Episcopal church down the street, yeah, Trinity Episcopal.
So somebody would buy it and use it as a church?
Yeah.
I doubt it. It could be, somebody could buy it and use it as a church.
Oh, okay.
Honestly, I doubt that would happen. That's not
Oh, okay.
just the trends we're seeing in society.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
You know
okay.
what I thought would be wonderful?
Hmm.
You have absolutely no mission,
Mhm.
safety mission here in Geneva, like they do in Rochester, Buffalo, New York City.
Mhm.
It would be wonderful if we could, somebody who wanted to buy it, to make it like a mission where that people could come,
Mhm.
homeless and stay, use the rooms.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how this would be done, but they'd have to have a staff, maybe a doctor, nurse on call, and the people that have been involved in this for a long time.
Mhm.
There's lots of Sunday school rooms upstairs, because we need bedrooms perhaps, or I don't know how they would do it, but we don't have that kind of mission here.
No, there might be an organization that would want to buy this site and use it for that. We all don't have the capacity to take that
And
project
maybe
on.
keep the sanctuary for when people want to go in and pray, or keep the chapel.
Yeah,
They want to go in, I know that Cecil works with the homeless.
Right.
He loves working with the homeless, and he's helped build, a homeless shelter for people that leave. And I had to say something. Something struck me a couple weeks ago. I went to pick up a friend of ours for Thanksgiving. And when we were coming home up Milton Street, here's a poor person sitting like this,
yeah.
and cooler stuff, all bags around. And you can tell that the person was homeless. It just
There's a
just
lot
tore
of need in the
my heart.
community.
And I think then I took the person home to her place, and as I was coming back up Milton, this had to be like after dark. You that person was still sitting
I can give you some background about that.
He's
person.
not homeless.
there.
I know quite a bit about that person.
Yes,
Oh, you do?
I can give you some background.
And that
about
can
it.
be for another,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Recently, Pastor Emily, in looking at the discipline, sees that first our church needs to be offered for sale to another Methodist church or Methodist agency. So that can be done by contacting the conference and say, our church is for sale. But there are a lot of options. And Gary Schultz has suggested that we might want to contact an international realtor like Sotheby's with a broader reach. To the original question, we don't know who will buy it and what they will use it for. We hope that somebody buys it for a good price.
Does that mean they won't have the noon timers come, they won't have the kitchen anymore to cook the food for people?
The community lunch program is separate from us. They'll need to make a decision about where they're going to be housed.
And they have been kept apprised of our discussions with Zion. This will not blindside them in any way, shape, or form.
Now, I have to say, excuse me, Ellen, excuse me, Pastor Ellen, I got so frustrated, I said to Barb, that person is still sitting over there, I've got to call the police, somebody's gotta go over and look and see if they're all right. So I called the police, and I told him the story, and he said, well, somebody will go in and check on. Well, 20 minutes later, I looked out the window, and there were 2 people. They were walking up Milton, they walked towards that person. Now, I don't know if they took the person home or put them somewhere.
I can
But
give you
the
some
next day,
background.
all the belongings were still there, but
Yeah.
a couple of days
Well, and
ago,
it sounds
I
like-
drove by and the person wasn't there anymore.
Okay.
But I
Yep.
just felt so bad. you
I know it,
course.
oh, I know it, and there is a lot of need in the community. Pat has a question,
And just to
then
say,
Courtney.
he has been helped and he has,
Yeah.
there are social workers working with him, so.
Right, and I know who we're talking about too.
Yeah. They make
From the
me
lunch
feel
We
bad.
know,
Yeah.
we know all,
Yeah.
we know, everybody, a lot of people know all about him and they
Yeah.
offer him a lot of help.
Yep.
Okay.
So
Cornelia?
other, she
Cornelia?
was chiming in on the question of this
Okay.
individual
A
too.
lot of us know him.
Yes.
And know his
Oh,
background.
that's good. I'm
Other
glad to hear that.
questions about the merger, the buying, the selling, rebuilding, all that jazz? All the mergers. I'm getting punchy, can you tell?
Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you, Ellen.
Welcome
Thank
back.
you for everybody that's on the team, thank you. All leadership team.
Get more food, there's lots back there.